Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Runways and Roadways. You've got Shay here today, and I'm actually at Fast 25 speaking with quite a few awesome guests. You won't hear Ryan today as he was not able to attend this conference, but I think it's going to be a good episode. Today we have Jimmy Apple, also known as EMS Avenger, Ashlyn Odell, and then we have all the gals from the Life and Sirens podcast, and we're going to take an opportunity to introduce everybody so you're familiar with who's speaking to us.
I'm Jimmy Apple. I'm known as EMS Avenger on social media. I'm a 20-year paramedic, most of that in 911, the last 2 years in neonatal and pediatric critical care. And when I am not working on a truck or creating content, then I am hiking. I love getting lost in the woods and doing like really strenuous, difficult hikes where you have to crawl on things and climb over stuff.
Okay, what's your favorite hike, Jimmy?
The favorite hike that I've done is in the Grand Canyon, hiking down to the Havasupai Indian Reservation. It's about 8 mile hike. You go down there, you see the Havasu Falls, kind of turquoise waters, beautiful scenery, but then you hike 8 miles back up and out of the canyon.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've seen pictures of that on Instagram. That's gorgeous.
Very Instagram worthy hike.
Yes,
yeah.
very.
My name's Ashlyn. I have been a paramedic for about 3 years now. I've been in EMS for 5 years. I work mainly in like suburban and rural EMS right now. I really just enjoy lifting when I'm off duty. I do anything that's usually not EMS related whatsoever.
I'm Jamie. I'm with the Life and Sirens podcast. I've been in EMS for 10 years. I've been a paramedic for 6 of those years and critical care for about 3.5, maybe 4. When we're not doing EMS, we mostly go backpacking. So that is kind of Jimmy stole our answer in the beginning, but like to go backpacking and get out for as many days as we can carry.
I'm Sophie Fuller. I'm paramedic Sophie on social media. I'm a critical care paramedic. I have been a paramedic for a little over 5 years. Could verify. I also work 911 ground critical care and air medical. If I am not doing EMS things, I'm probably dead.
I'm Aubrey. I'm a part of the Life and Sirens podcast. I've been in EMS for 6 years. I'm almost to my second year of being a paramedic, so we've made it this far, which is great news. When I am not doing anything EMS, I'm probably fixing one of my 3D printers because I've definitely...
Very, very cool. It's nice to meet all of you guys. All right, so I think one thing we're all noticing we have in common is that we all have a platform of some type. Outside of hosting Asnos podcast, I also do some TikTok stuff, like Shay. Gosh, it always feels weird to kind of talk about yourself, right? But I think that's a kind of a good segue into what inspired everybody to want to have a platform. And one thing we were talking about before we started to hit record was how to gain the trust of the EMS community. I think one thing we can all agree on is sometimes our peers can be our biggest critics. So what have you guys found? Let's break it down. Let's just start with kind of what inspired you, and then we'll get more into like gaining the trust of the EMS community. So Jimmy, I'm going to start with you.
So I have always been, I've always dreamt of being in some sort of forward-facing platform, where I'm visible and talking about something. Ever since I was a kid, and it manifested itself in being like drama club, that sort of thing when I was a kid. But as an adult, there was really no venue for that when I was not in EMS. When I got into EMS and I became passionate about learning and about medicine, that really lit a fire under me. Then I wanted those two to converge. And I had to learn the lesson that I wanted it too much, I think, for me at first. And so I didn't really find much success because I think people saw that. And so when I finally kind of honed things down and really figured out how to let the passion come first, that's when doors started opening. And I was pretty active on social media before TikTok came around, but then my daughters started sending me funny TikTok videos. I installed the app and I was like, this is it right here. I can sneak content into people who are watching cat videos. Yeah. What was the rest of the question? Like challenges?
Yeah, like challenges of gaining the trust of the EMS community.
So with me, I felt like it was important to be able to back up things with data in order to gain that trust. And So that's what I've always done is like verify, verify, verify on what I'm saying. But I think another part of gaining the trust of the EMS community is accepting the growth opportunities that are presented by social media. People will call you out on something that you've said or a way that you've said it or something that you've done. And you have two opportunities there. You can either go with that growth opportunity or refuse it. If you refuse it, you're going to become a toxic creator.
Mm.
And if you accept it, then you are going to gain the trust of the EMS community. I think they really respond to creators who accept the criticism of their content.
I love that. I think in general, people are really good at perceiving authenticity. And so if you're not being authentic, they're going to tell that right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you guys have all experienced this. Some people come at you and they might be right, but it's just in like a really aggressive way.
Yes.
And I'm like, man, if you would just like be like, hey, actually, I've read this, I've heard this, like it just opens up such a nicer discussion. So of course not everybody's always going to approach you how you wish they would, but I am so open to it as well because I'm like, I said this yesterday. We had a hot wing challenge. I lost first. Everybody else made it to round 5. Jimmy ate just for fun after getting to the hottest wing lesson. But one thing we had discussed when we were talking about it was, I think I said, people will argue with you even when they're wrong. But just wanting to make a platform where just because I have a platform doesn't mean I know anything, right? You could have read the same study exactly. You know it, I know it. So I just love to create an environment where just lends to teaching, and it's always so much easier when the person who's on the receiving end is nice about it if they're giving you a lesson instead. So
I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I want to speak to that about that I don't know everything. I wish people understood that I don't think any creator who is doing well right now and succeeding thinks that they know everything. I mean, really, the difference between me and someone who is a well-educated provider sitting at home is that I just had the will and the wherewithal to put myself in front of a camera and talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. All right, Ashlyn, you want to tell us some of your inspiration?
Oh, Josh. The main reason I started my platforms was because I noticed there was nobody out there. Like when I started back in 2019/2020, I didn't really know what to do in EMS first and foremost. Like I didn't know anything about anyone in EMS. I didn't know the difference between EMT, didn't even know there were paramedics on the truck, didn't know about an AEMT, didn't know what EMS did in general. So I think what really pushed me to go into a platform is to allow others to not be like me. I wanted people out there to have guides and really have that perspective of, hey, this is not what the internet's going to tell you. If you're really wanting to be in this career, this is what it's like. Like I've always branded myself on, I have real and raw content. I don't give you the sugar-coated version of EMS. I show you guys truly what it is like. And that was not like that when I started the career whatsoever. And has it exploded? Absolutely. Like I hate the word influencer, and I don't even like using content creator, but it's true. We put ourselves out there just like Jimmy said. Anyone can do this. Anyone can put up a camera. Anyone can speak into a mic. Any of the information that we say. But most of the time when I start my videos, it's, hey, this is out of the book that you guys use in your paramedic program too. Like, I'm not finding some random, like, special study that puts me above everybody else. No, this is the same crap that you guys can Google. This is the same stuff that you guys can put into a book. But, like, the girl I was just talking to, she's like, there's just a way that you explain it that makes sense. And I'm like, well, that's my goal. Like, making it broken down and giving you guys, like, not the flashy words, like not the big medical terms. Something that you mentioned when it was like, hey, we're all going to make mistakes. One piece of advice that I was told was, hey, if you make a mistake in your videos, keep it in. Because yeah, people are going to comment on it. And just like you said, if people take accountability, they're going to accept you more, and it actually starts another conversation. And it's like, okay, here's a second video bouncing off of this. Let's open up this mistake a little bit more. Why is this not incorrect? And it just blossoms into even more content for you guys.
I love that. Those are excellent points. I think I was in the same boat as you 10 years ago when I was getting into EMS. I think I've been in EMS 13 years technically. I had never met a flight paramedic or a flight nurse. I just knew I wanted to do it. And I was like, okay, the basic information I know is I have to do it for at least 3 years.
Yep.
That was all I knew. Okay, I have to get on a truck or in an ICU. And I wished then that I just had access to a mentor, and I didn't. So I was kind of winging it. But what I think this whole wave of social media has done is it's given easier access to mentorship.
Yeah.
And the amount of people who have DM'd me to be like, I don't know where to start. And I'm like, you need a degree first. It's
Yeah.
even like the basic, here's like step 1, 2, 3. And I think that's one thing that, we can say all the negatives of social media, but one of the really like positives is it's easy access to mentorship. And I think that's why a lot of us do it, is because if I could help someone else attain a goal and not have to struggle, then that would be like my ultimate goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to pass it over to Life and Sirens over here and get their perspective.
I accidentally got into social media. I had never planned it. I posted a video at one of the really rural services I worked at, and it went well, and it was an accident, and it was just a fun video, and it had nothing to do with education. One thing about me is I'm an absolute nerd, and I didn't really have access to other nerds besides these ladies. So it was a place where people would listen and talk back, and it was a great opportunity for me to learn, and I got really excited that other people were just as excited about EMS as I was. It just wasn't something I was experiencing where I was. So it kind of healed some of the burnout I had, and I am happy to be doing it. It's given me a lot of opportunities. It's given me a lot of new friends and a lot of new mentors as well. And I learn something new every time I post something. So I think the biggest struggle, though, is that there's always going to be judgment, even if you did everything by the book and you said everything exactly right, someone's still going to say something. In fact, this is a fun story. Absolutely terrifying story. Somebody made a fake email that no longer works on my current server. Fake name, and emailed our county mayor. And we are a very large service, okay? A video that was like completely kosher and fine and very normal, but like I was in my uniform, which I have permission to do. He did not care, obviously, but people will do anything to try to ruin you. So I think if you're trying to get into social media and people are being unkind, just be persistent, be kind back, and just keep doing what you're doing because it does get there.
Yeah.
As far as the podcast goes, all three of us work at the same station. We all work at Burton Street, and we would sit in the bay, and we would just have conversations about critical care, about responses, about dispatch, we would just talk about everything and anything. And we were just concerned about the state of EMS. How are we going to move forward? How are we going to convince people that this matters? And we just talked to each other. And finally, Soph said, we should start a podcast. And what if everybody in EMS sat in their bay and had these conversations about everything that we talk about? And we kind of decided to do it. And the challenges have really just been like the logistics. Honestly, everyone's been really supportive of it.
It's hard work.
I think like James said, so we were sitting around in the bay, and so like kind of offhandedly, jokingly was like, we should be recording this. And then she
I don't know.
And then she woke up one day from shift, like half asleep, sleep deprived, just like still rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. And she was like, no guys, I'm serious, we should record this. And like drove to a recording store and bought all the stuff. And for us having these conversations sitting in the bay and just like having truly meaningful conversations, we thought like a lot of our episodes are about culture in EMS and kind of like the relationships that you gain from that. And while EMS is very like culture intensive, like there's a lot of pride in being a paramedic, and there's a lot of pride in your partnership and like sharing a house for 24 hours and all of those things. It's also very isolating because you don't have like hospital staff, and it's not like the shared super community, right? You're most of the time you and your partner on the streets doing crazy stuff. And this kind of just gave us a platform to be able to make it not so isolating. And be able to just share experience.
As far as gaining trust with EMS professionals, there is this fallacy of power when you start to produce content that everyone just assumes that you have this like underlying certification that means you're allowed to talk about these things. And I had the same inclination. I thought that everybody that was producing content, they must have a master's in this or a doctorate in this. And then I started to realize that everyone producing content is just like me. Like we have a licensure and we're passionate about education and we want to learn and we want to push things forward in a positive manner. And that's what people talk about. But when you listen to things, you just assume that everything they say is Bible. And you have to
Mhm.
remember that these people are just people. And the same way that like I make mistakes with my patients that I learn from, is the same way that we talk about content that then later we're like, ooh, turns out not so great. And you kind of have to just roll with it. But that's a huge part of producing content, is just to recognize that you're just as good as the people you listen to.
I love that point. It actually reminds me of a comment that I have favorited on TikTok, but have not responded to because I was trying to decide if I wanted to. But it was occasionally I'll harass my brother and I'll randomly ask him a medical question. He teaches paramedic school, and then he'll off the cuff give me like a fantastic answer. And somebody commented, "Wow, that was a really great college level explanation of that point," and it came from a doctor. And it got me thinking about like, okay, for one, you could have just added some more since you're a doctor. I would have loved to know what you know, like teach me, right? But it also was the recognition that I'm not putting out content to teach a doctor because I'm a nurse and a paramedic. So a lot of what I teach you is going to be along those lines, and that's okay because I'm not trying to train a doctor at all. Now, if a doctor wants to weigh in, I love to learn. Like, please teach me. But it was like this misconception that what you're teaching has to be at the highest level, but that isn't what we do, and that's not what we train for. So we put out education, and we challenge each other, and we're all capable of learning really hard concepts, and we do that. But I'm not putting out content to train a medical student or a resident or an attending. So just having perspective on the level that we're attempting to reach to, I think, is like just being realistic. So Jimmy, any other comments?
Well, I think there is this obvious culture on the internet where people, when they receive information from others, that there is this like call to action that they receive to respond to it forcefully. Uh, yeah, if they feel like that they could have explained it better, if they feel like that they disagree or whatever, there is just this very competitive means of engagement there. I know me personally, as I've moved forward in what I'm doing, my desire is to less and less engage. Number one, if they're not engaging in good faith, then I don't engage with it at all. But to try to engage with that like kindly and kind of try to rewire the conversation a little bit, and that usually just kind of like takes the air out of it.
So on the topic of like what you said is like we need a master's, we need a doctor, and we need a degree to like put out content. No. Alex Jobber makes it her entire goal to tell people that you need to just start teaching what you know. You don't need any of this. She's trying to break that stigma, and I love what she says all about that. That's what she tries to push with her CE program. You mentioned burnout. So something that I know Jimmy and I talk about this probably every other week when it comes to content, but also EMS, is there is a content creation burnout. And it's because we're making content about our job, and most of the time we're not at our job. And like I know when I come home from work, I don't want to do anything. I stopped making content off duty because it was causing me more burnout. Have you guys ever felt burnout making your content because it's about our job? Like, do you ever feel that like when you're at your job, you're like, okay, I need to stop talking about this?
Yeah. I was actually talking with Jimmy about this, I think either yesterday or this morning, is that I haven't been putting out a lot of educational content for the last couple weeks to months, just because it's been really exhausting. And like I said, even when you put out like the best content you can possibly dream of, it's people are still combative.
Oh,
you know?
100%.
So sometimes if you see us taking a break from social media or our content maybe shifts for a little bit, I promise we will be back. You have to. I think people underestimate how difficult it can be to create content and keep up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes back to authenticity. If you're creating content while you're burnt out, then you're not doing it for the right reason. You're doing it just to do it, and people can tell that.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like, they say to get more following, like you have to post 3, 4, 5 times a day. But like for me, that doesn't feel authentic.
I don't even post every day.
Yeah, so I just post when it feels right to me, and that's what my platform's going to be about. So, all right, really good discussion, guys. Thank you for your input, and just give it a little bit of perspective. But I do want to touch on a few medical things on this podcast. So I'm actually going to put you on the hot seat, Jimmy.
Okay.
So your platform, you do an excellent job, one at consistency. But I know whenever I open up your social media, I'm going to see you talking about a new study, something in medicine, hitting a hot point, really challenging. Is this something that should change our care or not? So do you have something that you have studied recently, possibly a study or something that has come across your feed that has been impactful for you?
Yes. So I'm one of the things that I love to talk about the most is cardiac arrest care. It's kind of like the pinnacle of our care, and it's this thing that we need to be prepared to uh, be able to intervene in expertly. And so it's important for me to hammer things over and over and over again so that these things sink in and we resuscitate expertly. And one of the things that I'm constantly harping on is that no bicarb, no bicarb, no bicarb. Bicarb kills. There's no data that it improves survival in cardiac arrest. It's not in the ACLS algorithm for anything other than an acidotic arrest. And even then, the data doesn't necessarily say it's doing anything, even in that case. But there was a systematic review and meta-analysis that did come out about a year and a half ago that demonstrated that there may be some benefit if given early in the code, like no more than 16 minutes after downtime, to non-shockable rhythms. And I know that I've talked to Jeff Jarvis about this, and he is actually including that in his protocols, administering bicarb for non-shockable rhythms upon arrival. And that challenged me a little bit, and I'm still struggling with that because it wasn't a systematic review and meta-analysis of like strong RCTs, right? A systematic review and meta-analysis is only as good as the data that's being fed into it. So I personally would like to see an RCT before I would incorporate that into my practice. But when I see someone like Jeff Jarvis, who is one of the kings of data, incorporating that, it is challenging. It is very challenging. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's a good point. I think we could have a whole separate podcast probably on this one topic.
Right.
Yeah.
I know for us personally, where I work, we have the ECPR program in Minnesota, and when we get to our cardiac arrest, usually it's because we've been activated for ECPR, which means they were in a shockable rhythm, and it's in our protocol. And if we forget, we're also told by the ECMO physician to give bicarb. So we do use bicarb pretty heavily, even in shockable rhythms. I was going to mention Sarah Krager, MD. She has a website called ICU. Yeah, see, you already knew. She's fantastic. Has a fantastic metabolic lesson on here, and she does speak about using bicarb in this setting as well. I think along the lines of what Jarvis had talked about. So if you guys want to do a little further research, just go to ICU EDU, and you can actually watch her lecture on it as well. It's superb. If you want to get a little bit more in depth on the bicarb discussion. So, Jimmy, any other thoughts on that, or any other studies that you want to bring up, just to spice it up at all?
Well, actually, what I would bring up is just there's some things that we're ahead of the data on, or maybe we're a little bit over enthused about things that don't really have great data on. Like something that EMS loves to talk about right now are push dose pressors. And in reality, the data for the impact of push dose pressors has not been well studied, and there's not great data that, shows that we're even using push dose pressors responsibly. The data that we have on them, one of the most consistent threads in push dose pressors is that we are like misdosing horribly, like getting it wrong. And that's because there's not a great way of drawing up a push dose pressor except that trusting you're not getting it wrong. Right. And then the other one is that right now EMS loves, and pre-hospital loves TXA.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they look at it as the Narcan of hemorrhage control. You know what I mean? But in reality, the data on TXA is not that great, I would call it the Solumedrol of hemorrhage control. You know what I mean? And that it's funny because providers don't want to push Solumedrol because they're not going to see the benefit while they have the patient, but they want to push TXA even though they're not going to see the benefit while they have the patient.
Okay. I'm gonna pass it to you in a second because I know you have was gonna say something about that. But and also, if you only carry one type of push dose pressor, they're not all created equal in each situation. Whether it's you're pushing Levo or Neo or
Right.
Epi, there's indications when you would use one over the other. shall I mention vaso? I mean, I could have push-ups vaso,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, so just, adding one doesn't necessarily cover all situations that you would
No.
want to utilize one in. So that's something you would need to consider,
No, push-to
from your
epi could have a
department.
horrible effect on some patients,
Right, and there's
Yeah.
situations where you wouldn't want to give neo, like in certain cardiac patients, and there's situations where, if I have spinal shock, well, I could probably pick any one of the alpha ones and it'd be okay. So, you kind of have to consider that when you're going to implement those in your program as well. So,
Absolutely. And especially with pressors, I have a hard time sometimes because my background is in biology. So it's in like a biologist and research. And so I have a hard time with data because in my brain, I'm like, data is Bible. Like that's all you do. Except for sometimes you're just looking for a bridge. And EMS is tough in that way, is that sometimes you're not actually looking for it to improve patient outcome, but you're looking for it to bridge you to the next thing. And some of us get too stuck in that mindset.
Sure.
Is that we're either like so data driven that we forget that we need a bridge sometimes, or we're not data driven enough that we are only looking for bridges and we're not looking for anything definitive. The question that I have for Jimmy though is there are the crash studies you're familiar with, but the study that they did overseas with TXA was
cerebral hemorrhage.
Yes.
Yes.
Was so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because the data essentially said that if you're in a modern urban trauma system, so basically if you're anywhere in the US, with exceptions to some significantly rural places, TXA is not really going to give you much benefit. It's not going to do a whole lot. But if you are in an extremely rural setting, so if you're overseas where you're looking at like 8 to 16 hours before you even reach trauma care, like a surgeon at all, TXA shows a decent benefit.
Yeah.
It's at least statistically significant. And I thought that was fascinating, is that we spend a lot of time, especially in the US and the system, talking about like, is it beneficial? Is it not? And there's countries overseas that are like, it is, 100% is. And that's not arguable, but within our system, it is arguable. And that was an interesting, I would love to see a study that focuses solely on the US, but also rural agencies versus metropolitan, and what kind of transport times we're looking at.
The thing is that there is a benefit with TXA, right? I just think that U.S. providers think that the benefit is giving it while they're hemorrhaging. And I mean, and if you're a provider who's listening to this right now and you know that that's not the case, then you're not being targeted. But we know that when you kind of look at the cross section of some U.S. pre-hospital providers, that the education gets kind of dumbed down a little bit. And I think that a lot of people think TXA is for controlling that hemorrhage. I think that study on the cerebral hemorrhage was really interesting because that's the one bleed that we can't control, right? I mean, we can control intracerebral pressure. We can give, 3% or something like that. But this is the one time where TXA really is issuing a direct impact and the only impact that we can make.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That's an excellent point. I was about to ask you if you preload 2 grams up front, and then I remembered that you're a pediatric.
No, we do it by kilogram, like 25 milligrams per
Which
kilogram
makes
or
way more
something like
sense.
that.
So I'll
Yeah.
turn over here. Are you guys doing 2 grams up front?
We get adult sized patients though, but
It is. We do the 2 grams. We're giving TXA. We're probably not just giving TXA. We're gonna give blood. So I feel like if you are giving TXA, you need to have blood. I don't
Yes.
know. Like it's kind of a moot point. To be like, here's some, like you said, it's like Solumedrol too. Like it doesn't make sense to just do it by itself. And I think there's just too little understanding right now. It's just like a cool new toy, and for a long time, I feel like EMS, we just kind of like got bare minimum, and there's a lot of action in EMS as far as like almost like a protocol revolution, and we just love to add whatever we can for whatever we can. It's kind of like one of those things, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I think that we miss the point of TXA, and sometimes I think that it's kind of a moot point to talk about like the metabolic process of meds, but when you look at TXA, like it's the breakdown of plasmin into plasminogen. Like it is your breaking down of the substrate that then causes the degradation of your clot. And so truly you want to support that clot. And so if you're not adding blood, TXA is not supporting your circulatory system.
No.
It's just saying like, oh, you're clotting? Good job. I'll not mess with that. Like, my bad. It just goes in and it tells like your coagulation cascade to like simmer.
Yeah.
She's like, could you please don't mess this up for us? That's what it's
Yes.
doing. And then
Worked very hard for this clot.
yes,
Yeah.
like keep doing what you're
Right.
doing. We're going to keep these guys at bay, not break it down. And then you need to support your circulatory system with blood. And if you look at them as separate entities, you're not going to get far.
That's an excellent point. Thank you so much for breaking that down for us.
I'm glad you mentioned the blood. I mean, that you're almost kind of like shy about it, but we really need to hammer that point home. If they don't have clotting factors, then TXA is
Yeah.
peeing in the wind, Yeah.
That's fantastic. And with that excellent that's fantastic. And with that excellent explanation, I think we'll wrap this episode up. It's going to be a quick hitter, but for you guys listening, we've got a couple new people that you can go check out their content and give them a follow as well. We'll make sure to link those names for you and check us out again on our next episode.